Hello students, welcome back to your English literature class. In the previous session, you had learnt the explanation of pages 108 till 110 of the short story The Sound Machine by Roald Dahl. Today, we shall continue the same. By the end of this video, you will be able to understand the meanings of difficult words as used in the context, the related figures of speech. You'll be able to understand how the sound machine is destroyed, and you will be able to understand Klausner's curiosity to know what the doctor heard. So far, you have read that Klausner tested his theory with his machine in a park by hitting the base of the trunk of a beech tree with an axe. He heard a sound and telephoned Dr. Scott, requesting him to come immediately. While waiting anxiously for the doctor to arrive, Klausner reflected on the noise the tree made and noted that it made him feel sick with horror. He contemplated what noises a human being would make in the same situation, and concluded that the tree's noise was worse due to the frightening, toneless, throatless quality it possessed. He considered the sounds other forms of plant life would make, picturing the sound of a field of wheat screaming as it was being mowed, and resolving never to take his machine to one, because he would never be able to eat bread after that. He ran down a list of fruits and vegetables, determining whether or not they would shriek when picked. The arrival of the doctor ripped Klausner from his thoughts. Now, let us begin with today's lesson. Open your Echoes textbook at page number 111. The doctor looked at him. He seemed calmer now. There was no sign of madness or hysteria. He was merely disturbed and excited. Hysteria means exaggerated or uncontrollable emotion or excitement. Children, when Klausner had telephoned Dr. Scott, his voice had a frantic, almost hysterical note. But now, as the doctor observed, Klausner seemed to be calmer. He didn't appear to be insane. He seemed only disturbed and excited and not hysterical. They went across the road into the park, and Klausner led the way to the great beech tree, at the foot of which stood the long black coffin box of the machine and the axe. "Why did you bring it out here?" the doctor asked. "I wanted a tree. There aren't any big trees in the garden." So Klausner hurriedly took Dr. Scott to the beech tree, where the machine and the axe still lay near the tree. The doctor wondered why Klausner had brought the machine in the garden, to which Klausner answered that there weren't any large trees in his garden. And why the axe? You'll see in a moment. So doctor wondered why Klausner needed an axe. So Klausner answered that he'll come to know in a moment. But now, please put on these earphones and listen. Listen carefully and tell me afterwards precisely what you hear. I want to make quite sure. Precisely means exactly. So Klausner directed the doctor to put on the earphones and listen carefully so that he could tell him exactly what he had heard. The doctor smiled and took the earphones and put them over his ears. Klausner bent down and flicked the switch on the panel of the machine. Then he picked up the axe and took his stance with his legs apart, ready to swing. For a moment, he paused. Flicked means hit with sudden movement. So Klausner switched on the machine and prepared to strike the tree with the axe. He took his stance, means he took the position. Then he paused for a moment before striking the tree. "Can you hear anything?" he said to the doctor. "Can I what?" "Can you hear anything?" "Just a humming noise." So Klausner paused for a moment before striking in order to confirm if the doctor could hear anything, to which doctor told him that he could hear only the faint humming sound. Klausner stood there with the axe in his hands, trying to bring himself to swing, but the thought of the noise that the tree would make made him pause again. Now children, Klausner was still worried. He was still dreading the thought of the noise that the tree would make. "What are you waiting for?" the doctor asked. "Nothing," Klausner answered, and then lifted the axe and swung it at the tree. And as he swung, he thought he could swear he felt a movement of the ground on which he stood. He felt a slight shifting of the earth beneath his feet, as though the roots of the tree were moving underneath the soil. But it was too late to check the blow, and the axe blade struck the tree and wedged deep into the wood. Slight means small in degree. Underneath means situated directly below. Check, stop. Wedged, put something into a very small or narrow space so that it cannot move easily. So children, Klausner proceeded to strike at the tree with the blade a second time. As he made contact with the tree, he noticed a slight shifting of earth beneath his feet, as if the roots of the tree were moving right below the soil. But he could not stop himself now. This time when Klausner swung the axe hard, the axe was stuck deep into the tree flesh. At that moment, high overhead, there was the cracking sound of wood splintering and the swishing sound of leaves brushing against other leaves, and they both looked up, and the doctor cried, "Watch out! Run, man! Quickly, run!" Overhead means above the level of head. Splintering means break into small, sharp fragments. Brushing means touching lightly and gently. So just as the axe struck the tree and got stuck deep into the tree flesh, they heard a crackling sound from above. The severe blow on the tree trunk caused a great branch to get severed. The doctor had ripped off the earphones and was running away fast, but Klausner stood spellbound, staring up at the great branch, 60 feet long at least, that was bending slowly downward, breaking and crackling and splintering at its thickest point, where it joined the main trunk of the tree. The branch came crashing down, and Klausner leapt aside just in time. It fell upon the machine and smashed it into pieces. Ripped means pulled quickly or forcibly away. Spellbound means fascinated. Splintering means to break into small sharp fragments. Leapt means jumped. Smashed, shattered. So the doctor had torn off his earphones and moved away just in time to escape the blow, while Klausner still stood there fascinated. He was staring up at the huge branch, which was about 60 feet long. The branch was breaking from the thickest point where it was connected to the tree. It came down heavily, and Klausner jumped just in time to save himself. However, Klausner's sound machine could not be saved, and it was smashed into pieces. "Great heavens!" shouted the doctor as he came running back. "That was a near one. I thought it had got you." Klausner was staring at the tree. His large head was leaning to one side, and upon his smooth white face there was a tense, horrified expression. Slowly he walked up to the tree, and gently he prized the blade loose from the trunk. Leaning means bending. Horrified means filled with horror. Prized means used force to lift something off something else. The doctor rushed to check on Klausner and was relieved to find him unharmed. Klausner looked tensed and horrified. He removed the axe from the tree and then, "Did you hear it?" he said, turning to the doctor. Klausner softly asked the doctor if he had heard anything. His voice was barely audible. The doctor was still out of breath from running and the excitement. "Hear what?" Barely means hardly. Audible means able to be heard. Dr. Scott was panting and gasping for breath because he had run to save his life, and also he was excited right now. So when Klausner asked him if he had heard anything, he only answered, "Hear what?" "In the earphones. Did you hear anything when the axe struck?" The doctor began to rub the back of his neck. "Well," he said, "as a matter of fact." He paused and frowned and bit his lower lip. "No, I'm not sure. I couldn't be sure. I don't suppose I had the earphones on for more than a second after the axe struck." When Klausner asked the doctor again if he had heard anything when the axe had struck the tree, the doctor thought about this for a moment. He rubbed his neck and bit his lip before he eventually answered. He replied that he had managed to hear nothing because he only had his earphone on for a second before making a mad dash for his life to prevent the branch from falling on him. "Yes, yes, but what did you hear?" "I don't know," the doctor said. "I don't know what I heard. Probably the noise of the branch breaking." He was speaking rapidly, rather irritably. "What did it sound like?" Klausner leaned forward slightly, staring hard at the doctor. "Exactly what did you hear?" Probably means perhaps. Leaned means bent. Klausner continued to push the doctor to identify what he had heard, causing the doctor to become irritated. "Oh hell," the doctor said. "I really don't know. I was more interested in getting out of the way. Let's leave it." "Dr. Scott, what did it sound like?" "For God's sake, how could I tell? What with half the tree falling on me and having to run for my life?" Klausner continued to push the doctor to identify what he had heard, causing the doctor to become irritated that his friend wasn't more concerned about the threat to their life than the sound in his ears. The doctor certainly seemed nervous. Klausner had sensed it now. He stood quite still, staring at the doctor, and for fully half a minute he didn't speak. The doctor moved his feet, shrugged his shoulders, and half turned to go. "Well," he said, "we had better get back." Shrugged means raised his shoulders slightly to express doubt or ignorance. Klausner could sense that the doctor was nervous, and he stood there still. He was staring at the doctor, and he did not speak anything for half a minute. The doctor then moved a little, and he shrugged his shoulders, and he was about to go and said, "We had better get back." That means they should go back to the house. "Look," said the little man. Now his smooth white face became suddenly suffused with color. "Look," he said, "you stitched this up." He pointed to the last gash that the axe had made in the tree trunk. "You stitched this up quickly." Suffused means spread all over. So the doctor attempted to leave, but Klausner refused to let him go without tending to the tree's wound first. Pointing to the gash in the tree, Klausner instructed the doctor to stitch the wound up. "Don't be silly," the doctor said. "You do as I say. Stitch it up." Klausner was gripping the axe handle, and he spoke softly, in a curious, almost a threatening tone. Gripping, firmly holding. So Klausner finally instructed the doctor to do as he told him, to stitch the wound up in a threatening tone. "Don't be silly," the doctor said. "I can't stitch through wood. Come on, let's get back." So the doctor told Klausner that it was impossible for him to stitch through wood. It was a silly request anyway. He suggested that they should go back. "So you can't stitch through wood?" "No, of course not." "Have you got any iodine in your bag?" "What if I have?" "Then paint the cut with iodine. It will sting, but that can't be helped." "Now look," the doctor said, and again he turned as if to go. "Let's not be ridiculous. Let's get back to the house and then paint the cut with iodine." Iodine, children, is a dark colored substance that is used in medicines. Paint means apply to surface. Sting, hurt. Ridiculous, absurd. When Dr. Scott explained that it was impossible for him to stitch through wood, Klausner insisted that the doctor must rub at least some iodine on the tree's gashes. So he told him to apply iodine on the gash that the axe had made. So when Dr. Scott explained that it was impossible to stitch through wood, he insisted that the doctor must at least rub some iodine on the tree's gashes. But the doctor was again reluctant. He found the idea of applying iodine on the tree trunk quite absurd. He suggested that they should go back to the house. However, Klausner was adamant. He insisted the doctor to apply iodine on the gash of the tree in order to treat the wound. So children, this brings us to the end of today's lesson. I hope you have understood the story so far. Your homework for today is solve question 1A given at page number 166. How is the theme of appearance versus reality reflected in the story, The Sound Machine? Give examples from the story to prove it. So you have to give examples from the story to prove your point. Also, quote relevant lines from the story. Thank you.